Hi, everyone, and happy Monday and happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I am Abra Kurt, and you are watching Sparked. Sparked is my lifestyle series and a warm and welcoming online community where each and every week we light fires of connection, reflection, and inspiration about things like personal growth, wellness, and the world around us. Each and every episode is meant to be interactive and to make a positive difference and to spark further conversation and action. So, if you're a dreamer, a doer, or anyone on a journey to live your most meaningful, joyful, and fulfilling life, you are in the right place, my friend. So, say hi, let me know you're here, and start connecting. I see Scott and I see Vicky. As you all are hopping on tonight, please say hi and let me know that you're here. Thank you so much for joining me on Martin Luther King Jr. Day to celebrate the life and legacy of this giant who left an incredible void when we lost his light in 1968. Tonight's episode was actually inspired by two things for me. I see Julie. Hello. It is so great to see you. And Dana and Donna. Hello. Thank you guys for being here. As you all are hopping on, please say hi and connect in the comments. Tina, hello. It is great to see you. Tonight's episode was inspired by two things for me. One, of course, it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And so, of course, we are inspired by his life and the legacy of his incredible work. And the title of tonight's episode, Better Than We Found It, was inspired by a song. And those of you who are country music fans are probably familiar with the artist Maren Morris. The song Better Than We Found It is a protest song that she wrote back in August in the midst of the pandemic and in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement that was sweeping the country after the George Floyd murder. And Better Than We Found It speaks to my heart in so many different ways, and particularly as a white woman of privilege who tries very hard to be a vocal and visible ally around issues that matter. The song really spoke to me, and so it inspired tonight's title. Georgie and George, it is great to see you. Nico, good evening. It is so great to see you here. Thank you for being here. Mwah. So those are the dual inspirations for tonight's episode. Of course, the life and legacy of MLK, and the song that inspires me and that I've listened to a lot during these past few months as we think about what is going on in the world, in our country, the world around us, and how we can do our part to leave it a little better than we found it. So, as you all are hopping on and saying hello, I want to ask you to do one more thing in the comments. We are here tonight to celebrate MLK Day together, to talk about the life and work and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. So I would like to ask you in the comments to share a few words about your feelings about MLK. What does MLK mean to you? What are some words that come to mind when you think of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life and work and legacy? If you would just share a few words in the comments. Hey, Jenny, it is so great to see you here. I am so glad you can catch us live tonight. It was a school, we were off school today. Jenny is a teacher, and normally she catches the replay because she's working so hard to give her best to the little ones that she teaches. But she's here live tonight, and I'm very excited about that. All right, guys, so leave a few words, if you will, in the comments about what does Martin Luther King Jr. mean for you? A few words. What does his, what comes to mind? What adjectives? How would you describe his life work? Just what words, what word association do you have with MLK? Julie says, A dream that one day all people will be equal. Yeah, Scott says brave, inspirational dreamer. Yeah, I love those. I love those. Thank you. Keep them coming, you guys. Keep them coming. Um, for me, I have to say, the concept of nonviolence. Nonviolence and civil disobedience, for me, were two big ones, right? I have mad respect for King's philosophy that we have a moral obligation to break unjust laws, and his adherence to the concept of civil disobedience speaks to, that rebel in me, that part of my heart. Donna says MLK was a peaceful warrior for justice who preached love. Yeah. George says prescient. Georgie says freedom. Absolutely. All of those are so powerful. And there's also another word that comes to mind for me, and it's almost something that's so. Nico says courage and freedom. Yes, two freedoms. Trish, it's so great to see you here. Light drives out darkness. Love conquers hate. Yes. Beautiful, beautiful words in tribute to the life and work of MLK. Vicky says he gave his speech the year that she graduated high school and she saw it live on TV. Was that the I Have a Dream speech, Vicky, here in DC? Probably. That's the one we all think of, right? The I Have a Dream speech at the March on Washington on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. Thank you for sharing those words. That just fires me up, right? These are all the things that we think of when we think about this day, this incredible man, his life and work, and the legacy that he has left in our hands for us to continue carrying forward. And those are some of the things that I want to talk about tonight. So, if you have, unless you've been living, kind of under a rock for the past, 10 months, right? Our world, our country, we're more fraught than ever, right? With tragedy, with division, with inequality, with injustice that still lingers, half a century after, King's speech, right? We are still fighting these fights, right? And our world is more fraught than ever. And so this episode is about coming together to pay tribute and to also talk about ways that we can leave this world better than we found it, because we all have a role to play. Hi, Craig. It is so great to see you here. Thank you for joining us this evening. So every single one of us has the capacity to make a difference and leave this world, right, better than we found it. So tonight, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about the life and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to talk a little bit about the concepts of social change, of service to others, of giving back, what that means, what that looks like, right? I'm going to share some tips for how to make a difference in our own communities. I'm going to share some resources for further exploration to learn more about the life and work of Dr. King and his incredible legacy. And of course, as we do every week here on Sparked, we are going to pause for our moment of joy. We are going to learn a little bit about an amazing charity that we are going to name as our beneficiary this evening. And of course, we are going to play a few rounds of themed trivia. So we're going to play a few rounds of MLK themed trivia tonight. So if that lights your spark, let's please send up some hearts for Martin Luther King Jr. for this day to honor his life, work, and legacy. And hit that share button. While you're hitting the hearts button, hit that share button and let's bring some more people into this conversation. Let's celebrate this day publicly and together and flood our social media feeds with the positivity of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life, work, and legacy. Thank you guys so much. Hit that share button, send up some hearts, and let's share this around our social feeds. Okay. So you all know we start most of our episodes, we jump right in now to the quote of the week. But before we do that tonight, I actually want to ask our first trivia question before we dive in to the quote of the week, because the first trivia question is actually related to the quote of the week. And our quote of the week was actually inspired by a part of King's life that this trivia question is related to. So get ready to make your guesses in the comments. Our first trivia question of the night is, okay, we've talked about King's legacy of, nonviolence and civil disobedience, right? His idea that we have a moral obligation to break unjust laws. Just as he said we have a moral and ethical obligation to follow just laws, we also have a moral obligation to break unjust laws. So that philosophy got King arrested intentionally and unintentionally many times throughout his life. And his library and archives talk about that. So our first trivia question is related to King's incarcerations. How many times was Martin Luther King Jr. arrested and put in jail for his civil disobedience and just on other exaggerated and, probably made up charges a lot of the times as well? How many times was King put in jail? Take your guesses in the comments, because this question is related to our quote of the week. And this week, there are actually 2 quotes of the week, you guys. There's a bonus. There's one and there's a bonus. So, of course, one of our quotes of the week is from Martin Luther King Jr., and it is related to one of his periods of incarceration. And I know that you all are on Facebook, on social media. You have seen all of the quotes that people share on MLK Day, right? There are a plethora of inspiring, wise words from Martin Luther King Jr. Yeah, Kim says nonviolent civil disobedience. Scott's going to say 5 times. Julie says 6. Nico says 25. All right, some guesses coming through. Keep those guesses coming. How many times was Martin Luther King Jr. arrested and put in jail? Because our quote of the week is inspired and came from one of those periods of incarceration. And there are so many quotes, right? So many incredible, wise words that make beautiful, shareable moments that came from Dr. King. I chose the first quote of the week this week from his letter from a Birmingham jail. And I chose a passage from that. It's chock full of really amazing, inspiring words as well. It was hard to even pick just one line from that letter. But to me, that letter speaks to a moment where King was a little frustrated. And he was explaining himself to people, right? So for those who may not be familiar, Letter from a Birmingham Jail was written in April 1963. It was written while King was literally incarcerated in Birmingham, Alabama, after having been arrested for the Birmingham campaign to protest economic and social injustice and racial segregation in Birmingham. And I see a lot more guesses coming up. George says 2, too many times. 3, 24, more than 20. Craig says 29. Kim says she just read that. Everyone should. Yes, you guys. Letter from a Birmingham jail. I actually posted a link to the full letter on my Facebook page. It's made public. After this episode, if you haven't read the full letter, take the time to read it. It's long. It's powerful, y'all. It is powerful and worth a full read. And King wrote that letter in response to being criticized by fellow members of the clergy. Now remember, Dr. King was also a reverend. And fellow members of the clergy criticized that campaign and said it was ill-advised, it was ill-timed, and they had some words about it. And so our first quote of the week was from a letter from a Birmingham jail, which King wrote because he wanted to respond to that. He wanted to respond to the criticism and try to explain why he did what he did in the moment that he did it. And Kim said it takes an hour to read. Yeah, it's about 7,000 words, you guys. So settle in, read it. It's not a whole book, though. It's not a whole book, but it takes some time to really read it, to take it in, to really soak it in, and understand it. But the first quote of the week is from Letter from a Birmingham Jail, written by Martin Luther King Jr. in April of '63. And this really just hits me right in the gut and in the heart, you guys. And it's one of the passages that has motivated me. I remember reading this, probably in high school for the first time, and just being motivated by the end of this quote. And this quote is, "We will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words and actions of bad people, but for the appalling silence of good people." The appalling silence of good people. And that piece right there is what just cuts me right in my heart, you guys. And it's one of the things I said at the top of the show. I try so hard to be a vocal, visible ally about issues that matter deeply to me and that have real human consequence. And so the silence, right? The silence of our friends, right, is deafening and injurious and harmful. And this quote from King from a Letter from a Birmingham Jail just really, really drives that home for me. He concludes that letter with this really powerful and hopeful passage that I also want to share. So take the time, read the whole letter, but this is how he ends it, and it's on a really hopeful note. "Let us all hope that the dark clouds of racial prejudice will soon pass away, and the deep fog of misunderstanding will be lifted from our fear-drenched communities. And in some not too distant tomorrow, the radiant stars of love and brotherhood will shine over our great nation with all their scintillating beauty." The radiant stars of love and brotherhood. Y'all, we are still looking up to those stars. We are still looking up to those stars. We still have work to do. We are here tonight to come together to talk about Dr. King's life, work, and legacy, and share some ways that we can leave this world better than we found it, and help fulfill on that hope, right? Help fulfill on that hope. All right, I'm going to take a minute before we get to our bonus quote of the week and answer the trivia question. I think I saw one correct answer come through. One correct answer. There were quite a few guesses. We had some 5, 6. Nico says 25, 2, 3, 24. Vicky says more than 20. Craig says 29. Donna says, sorry, I meant 30. Trish says 28. All right, one of those guesses is correct. And if your name is Craig and you guessed 29, that is correct. You guys, Dr. King arrested and jailed 29 times for acts of civil disobedience and also on other made up and exaggerated charges. And the King Center speaks to that, those periods in their archives and the King Library. And that period in Birmingham gave us some really inspiring words from Letter from a Birmingham Jail. And our first quote of the week that reminds us the silence of good people is appalling, y'all, appalling. And on that note, I want to get to our bonus quote of the week, because I talked a little while ago about how this episode was actually twofold inspired for me. One, of course, by the fact that it is MLK Day and we are celebrating the life, work, and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but also the song that gave me the inspiration for the show's title, and that is Better Than We Found It, a protest song by country singer-songwriter Maren Morris. And the second quote of the week is actually the chorus of that song, and it just speaks to me very, very personally and to my heart. And it's a song that I've replayed so many times over these past few months since it was released in October. And this is the chorus and our second quote of the week for this week. When time turns this moment to dust, I just hope that I'm proud of the woman I was. When lines of tomorrow are drawn, can I live with the side that I chose to be on? Will we sit on our hands, do nothing about it, or will we leave this world better than we found it? You guys, I love, love, love this song. I love that chorus. It's a rallying cry to all of us, right? It is a rallying cry to do something. And she wrote this song in August of last year. And about writing the song, Marin said, she wasn't going to write a song like this unless she, kind of came right out and said which side of the line she was on, right? Because she believes that when it comes to human issues, there is a right and a wrong, and it's not political or partisan, you guys. It's about right and wrong. And that is something that I believe very, very deeply as well, that these are not political or partisan issues. It is a matter of human rights, human equality, and it's about right and wrong, and silence and being courageous and being willing to show up in the way that the moment calls for. And so I'm so grateful. We're a musical family around here, and music is healing and inspiring to us in so many ways. And so I wanted to share that song with you as kind of our bonus quote of the week this week. Yeah, Scott says, wow, 29 times. Vicky says, yeah, he had a mission. He did. All right, yeah, 29 times. And, and as I said, some of that was intentional and some of it not so, because one of the words that really comes to mind for me about MLK is leadership. And it's almost so generic, so 35,000 feet, right? But he just really embodies that word on every possible level for me. When you think about what leaders should be, what they should look like, what they should do, how they should lead their people, how they should inspire people, how they should show up, be on the front lines doing the thing they want others to do, right? He bore the brunt of so much bigotry and backlash, incarcerated 29 times. Yes. All right. Inspiring words from Dr. King and singer-songwriter Maren Morris about leaving this world better than we found it and not being silent when the moment calls for it. So, okay, what do we do? So how do we leave this world better than we found it? How do we leave this world better than we found it? What do we do? Right? So for me, it starts with one simple step. And that is recognizing that we all have a role to play. Every single one of us has a role to play. Every single one of us can do something. It doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter where we're from. It doesn't matter how much money we have, right? Because some people are like, well, I can't donate a bunch of money to charity, or I don't have time to volunteer. No, there's something that all of us can do, all right? In case in point, I want to share a story with you guys, and I don't know if they're on tonight. She had responded that she was going to be able to be here. I don't know if they're here, but my dear, sweet, brave, and courageous and curious nephew and his lovely mom illustrate this, how it doesn't matter how old you are, right? We all have a role to play. My 11-year-old nephew, you guys, is giving back in his community. And we FaceTimed with him on Christmas Day. And he talked about his presents that he opened that morning, and, the toys, and, we were talking about our fur babies and all the things. And we said, all right, so what are you going to do for the rest of your day? And he says, well, I'm actually getting ready to go to the shop. And his family owns a sandwich shop in their hometown in, I don't know if it's in or just near Meadville, Pennsylvania. That's where my husband's from. And he said, we're getting ready to go to the shop because we're doing food for families today on Christmas Day. Okay, they own a sandwich shop in their hometown, and there are families in the community that are struggling both because of the pandemic and for other reasons, as families struggled before this happened, right? And this has just made it worse on many levels. But they honestly went shopping. It was a way that they could give back and do something in their community and enlist the whole family to do it. And so there was my 11-year-old nephew at his family's restaurant on Christmas Day, chopping up food and preparing meals so that they could do their food for families in need on Christmas Day through the takeout window, curbside pickup for families and individuals in need on Christmas. So, you guys, we don't need a family business to do it, right? We don't need $1 million to give back. It doesn't matter how old we are, okay? He was chopping up vegetables. Trish says, yay, Landon. Yeah, let's send up some hearts for Landon and his mom and setting an example of giving back in our communities, right? What a powerful statement that is. Yeah. Vicky says, yay, Landon. That's her grandson. Okay, you guys, so we all have a role to play. We all have a role to play. And there are kind of three main ways, right, that we can give back. Three main ways with our time, with our talent, and our treasure. Time, talent, and treasure, right? So our time is like volunteering, right? Like doing what Landon did, right? Our treasure, is kind of what his mom was doing, right? Opening up her store, giving away product to people in need, giving our money, contributing to charity, right? Donating something. And our talent, right, is, there's a lot of people who do pro bono work, right? Like pro bono lawyers, pro bono coaching, right? Pro bono therapists and counselors, like whatever it is that we are called to do, maybe in our professions or that we have some kind of skill at, people who do pro bono graphic design for nonprofit organizations. There's all kinds of ways that we can give back in this world with our talent, okay, as well. And it's something that I try to do here on this show, right? In my lane as a life coach, life and wellness coach, lifestyle designer, motivational speaker. It's why I created this community. And we started this community in May of last year during Mental Health Awareness Month to make a space for us to come together and talk through the challenges that we were facing during the pandemic. And it has grown into this show, a lifestyle show, and kind of informal ways to, talk about some coaching topics too. And so that is one way that I'm giving back. And you guys, just by virtue of being here, you are a part of that community, all right? You are showing up. You are a part of this community every single week, all right? People are contributing to support and sustain this content and community and keep it moving forward week after week after week. We pay that forward with a 10% contribution to a charity doing meaningful work in our local communities around the country. So this community in and of itself, you all as a part of this community are already leaving this world better than you found it by virtue of being here and giving and showing up and being a part of this community. Which leads me to, I want to share this week's charity with you all. I want to share this week's charity, and it is very topical and very relevant to why we're all here today on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, okay? This week's charity is the King Center in Atlanta, Georgia, which was founded by Coretta Scott King, MLK's widow, and is now currently run by their daughter, Bernice. The King Center's mission is to prepare global citizens to create a more just, humane, and peaceful world. And their programs include things like community education and training, a leadership academy, a forum for students, and of course, the King Library and Archives. So this week, 10% of all contributions that come in are going to the King Center to help support the ongoing work of Martin Luther King Jr. and his life and legacy. So to everyone who has already sent in a contribution, thank you so much. If you are considering it, it keeps this community up and running. And this week we are paying it forward with a 10% contribution to the King Center in honor of Martin Luther King Jr. So thank you, everyone. All right, so this is how we give back here at Sparked. This is how we're all part of a community that's giving back. But what if you want to take action on your own, right? How do you get started? How can you do something to leave this world better than you found it? Okay, so you recognize that you can. We all can, right? No matter how old we are, where we are, what our circumstances are. So how do you start? And for me, It's the concept of think globally and act locally, right? Act locally. So that concept that Landon and his mom, Alicia, right, are subscribing to in their own communities, right? They're thinking big picture. Like there are families who are struggling, who are hungry, who are in need because of this pandemic and other circumstances in their lives. And we're going to act locally with what we have, where we are, to give back in some way, right? And so that is where we all start, right? What matters to us? What matters to us? When we look around and see an issue that we want to help address, right? What change do we want to see in the world, right? What change do we want to see in the world? And how can we start locally where we are? Is it hunger, right? Is it animals? Is it the environment? Is it human rights, women's rights, LGBTQ rights, right? Whatever it is, think about the big picture and then think about what you can do locally to get started. What kind of change do you want to see? And we can all take action to make it happen. Okay. There are so many resources to find opportunities to volunteer in our communities. If we want to make contributions to charities, I'm going to share a list of some resources to find ways to volunteer and give back in the show notes that we'll publish tomorrow. Okay. So our charity, right, our giving back with time, talent, and treasure, big ways to give back and make a difference. There's something that I want to share, though, and it was about Dr. King's philosophy about charity as a long-term solution. And one of the resources I want to share with you all for further exploration, if you want to learn a little bit more about the life and legacy of Dr. King, is this book by Michael Eric Dyson, called April 4th, 1968. And that, of course, is the date that MLK was assassinated in Memphis. And Dyson's book is about how King's death specifically left its own kind of legacy in this country, right? The aftermath of his actual death, not just his life and work, but what his death meant for the future of this country at that particular moment in time. And there's a chapter in Dyson's book called What Would Martin Do? What Would Martin Do, right? And he talks about charity and giving back, but he talks about how King was actually not a big fan of charity as like the permanent solution to a problem, right? You can't just keep throwing money at something indefinitely and forever, right? It's never going to go away. There's just going to be more and more generations of people needing the same kind of help, right? So King's philosophy was this: true compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It is not haphazard and superficial. It comes to see that an edifice which produces a beggar needs restructuring. He believed charity was a poor substitute for justice. So what were the circumstances that were creating these needs in the first place? How do we address those? How do we address those root causes, solve the problem, and not have to keep throwing money, right, at a problem, not have to keep giving of our time, right? We can meet the needs of the people who have them while working to solve those problems at the same time. And this book is really powerful, and I just want to share, I collect books, as most of you realize and can tell from not only the shelf behind me in my office, but our library at home. And I collect, in particular, books signed by the authors. And I had an opportunity to meet Michael Eric Dyson at the reception, one of the receptions for the launch of this book back in 2008. This book was published around the 80th anniversary, the 80th birthday, King's birthday, and it was just a few months after the inauguration of President Barack Obama. And I was at a reception and book signing and got to have a conversation with Michael Eric Dyson, and he's one of the most globally renowned sociologists and thinkers and writers on these topics of equality and racial justice. And so I was totally fangirling him in the moment and, hogging up a little bit of his time. And when he signed my book, I just wanted to share this because I'm going to fangirl again while I'm, sharing parts of this with you. But it was one of the most meaningful, personal inscriptions that an author ever left in a book to me. And he wrote, "To Barbara, a lovely soul sister. Love, Mike." He signed it Mike, so I can call him Mike. A lovely soul sister. And I had forgotten that inscription until I picked this book back up and was looking through it to get content for today's show. And it just, oh God, I hope I live up to those words. I hope I live up to those words by being a soul sister, by being a visible and vocal ally. And that's what we're here to do tonight, right? A lot of us have probably seen the memes that are going around social media, right? Like, well, if you thought that you would, if you ever wondered what you would do, right, during, the civil rights movement, it's what we're doing right now, right? It's what we're doing right now. And so if you said that, you would march with Dr. King, are you marching today, right? This is our march, right? This is our way of showing up, of helping to leave this world better than we found it, of talking about the life, work, and legacy. We are showing up here today and carrying that forward. This is our march. So thank you, you guys, for being part of that. All right. So now I want to ask the second trivia question of the night, and that is, what president, we are here today because it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is a federal holiday. What president signed the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday into federal law? What president signed the Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday into law? Take your guesses in the comments. And while you're doing that, I want to talk about the second part of how we make a difference, how we leave this world better than we found it. And this has to do with, right, like we talked about the thinking globally and acting locally. But we also said we were going to talk about social change, right? The concept of social change. And that's big, right? Social change is about cultural change, institutional change. And so, gosh, some of us, like, what does that even mean? What does that even mean, right? So I wanted to take some time to talk about social change because it was the philosophy that drove King's work, right? And it has driven me my whole life. It has driven me my whole life. Not only my professional career, my background in nonprofit work, and even in corporate America, supporting our corporate, foundation and that work, but all the way back, even when I was a student in school, you guys, when I was a student in school, I was the kid while other people were like writing papers, other girls, right, in my classes were writing papers about like Eleanor Roosevelt and, Sandra Day O'Connor. I was, giving speeches about apartheid and writing papers on Abby Hoffman 30 years before Aaron Sorkin was writing movies about him. So social change, social justice is just, I don't know, it's in my blood in some way. It's in my blood in some way. It has driven me through my whole professional career. And I still, crave that carving out of these spaces to be able to share a little bit of that still to this day. I see some guesses coming through about the president who signed the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday into federal law. I see a Clinton. I see a George H.W. Bush. I see another Clinton. All right, keep those guesses coming, you guys. Keep the guesses coming. While we talk a little bit about social change, right, the big picture, right? We talked about acting locally, but what about social change? Like, how do we actually play a role in big movement social change, right? So it starts with like understanding what social change even is, And sociologists define social change as changes in human interactions and relationships. Basically, essentially, our attitudes and behaviors, right? Our attitudes and behaviors. Changes in human interactions and relationships that transform cultural and social institutions, okay? They occur over time and have long-term consequences for society, okay? And this change begins with how we interact with each other, you guys. It begins with how we interact with each other. These are changes in human interactions and relationships, our attitudes and behaviors, okay, that then go on to transform cultural institutions, cultural and social institutions. It starts with human interaction, you guys. So even the big, unwieldy global idea of social change starts right here, okay? Starts small, one on one. I'm seeing some other guesses come through. I got a couple of Johnsons. A couple Johnsons, LBJ. Nico says Reagan. All right, you guys, keep them coming, keep them coming. I want to talk about social change writ large for another minute, and then we'll answer the trivia question. But so it starts with human interaction, right? It's human interaction. It's changes in the way we see, perceive our attitudes about each other, the ways we interact with each other. It starts small, right? It starts local, just like think globally, act locally. That's what creates social change, you guys. And from a tangible perspective, those seeds of social change, right, can look like taking your 11-year-old to the family business to volunteer and give back in his community, okay? It can look like the kinds of books and toys we buy for our kids, the kinds of books we keep on the shelves in our own homes, right? Speaking up when someone makes a sexist or racist or homophobic comment, saying something, right? Not the silence, right? Not the appalling silence. Speaking up, saying something when something's not right, all right? Also, just having the awareness to understand that just because we may not have experienced a particular problem doesn't make it any less true of someone else's lived experience, all right? Just because we may not have experienced something personally doesn't make it any less true in someone else's lived experience. Empathy. It's about empathy, okay? Social change, big time social change, starts out looking a lot like empathy and understanding what we do and what we say in our day-to-day interactions, you guys. Day-to-day interactions. It starts with the capacity to feel empathy for someone else's lived experience. All right, so the trivia question was, what president signed the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday into federal law? And we have a correct answer. If you said Bill Clinton, you are wrong. There is a Bill Clinton tie-in that comes a little bit later that I will share in a minute, but he's not the one who signed it into law. If you said Reagan, Nico, you are correct. Ronald Reagan, despite his initial opposition to the bill, signed the Martin Luther King Jr. federal holiday into law in 1983. Having passed both houses of Congress with veto-proof margins, so probably also, driving him a little bit to sign it, despite his initial opposition to it, right? Veto-proof margins, both houses, House and Senate passed it. Reagan signed it into law in 1983, and it would take effect 3 years later. The first Martin Luther King Jr. Day celebrated as an official federal holiday was in 1986. 1986 was actually the first time it was celebrated. Signed into law by Reagan in 83. Nico, you are correct. All right. So 8 years then, and this is where the Clinton tie-in comes in. 8 years after that first official holiday celebration, so in 1994, Congress passed another bill Congress passed another bill that Clinton then signed into law, and it was the King Holiday and Service Act. The King Holiday and Service Act, which designated Martin Luther King Jr. Day as a national day of service that we know it as today. The National Day of Service that we know it as today was signed into law by Clinton in 94, 8 years after the first federal holiday was celebrated in 86. And that brings to mind another quote from me, right? From MLK himself, as we're talking about a National Day of Service. One of the most popular King quotes that I see shared around on social media today is, the most persistent and urgent question, right? Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? And that is directly related to this day becoming a national day of service, all right? And that is an important question that leads me to talk about, you know what? Giving back, okay? Giving of our time, talent, treasure, being generous, affecting social change, service to others benefits us too. Benefits us too. It actually impacts our own well-being in real and tangible ways, okay? So mindful giving and service to others is good for us. Studies have shown that volunteering, y'all, is a predictor of better mental and physical health and self-esteem. Volunteering is a predictor of better mental and physical health and self-esteem. Giving back is good for us. And neuroscientists and psychologists have shown that generosity, okay, being generous, giving away of our time, talent, and treasure, actually lights up happiness centers in our brains. So being generous makes us happy. Giving back makes us happy. Volunteering makes us mentally and physically healthier and improves our own self-esteem. It is good for us to do this work. It is good for us, you guys, to do this work. All right. So with that, I also want to take a pause for a minute and share a moment of joy. Share a moment of joy this week. And this one's going to be a little bit different because it's not just one moment, but it is just a whole world of good news that I'm about to open you up to, you guys. A whole new world of good news that I'm about to share with you all. And this is a Facebook page, its own news website, and it's an Instagram account. And, you know, when we think about the life and work and legacy of Dr. King, right, we think about solving social injustice, right? Fighting for social change, the work, there's so much work that still needs to be done, right? Sometimes we get hung up on all the, you know, the hard things, right? The hard things, the long way that we still have to go, unfortunately, right? But there is good news. There is good news out there, y'all. There is good news out there for our communities of color, for our Black friends, all right? And this is what I want to share with you guys. It is called Good Black News. Good Black News. Super simple, you guys. It was founded in 2010, originally as just like a Facebook page where they would start posting good news articles that were inspiring stories that were coming from the Black community. And it grew into its own goodblacknews.org website, and they now have an Instagram account as well. And it's just so freaking inspiring, you guys. Just go there. This is the moment of joy sharing that with you all, because the whole site, the whole Facebook page, it's all just flooded with good news stories. So go there, check it out. Good Black News, you guys. Good Black News. Some amazing good news that we have to celebrate this week is Kamala Harris is about to become the Vice President of the United States. All right, the first woman, the first Black woman to hold this office. That is some good Black news that I am excited for, y'all. Big time, big time. All right. So, third and final trivia question of the night. Third and final trivia question of the night is, in what year did Martin Luther King Jr. win the Nobel Peace Prize? He is, yes, a Nobel Peace Prize winner among his many, many other accomplishments. In what year did he win the Nobel Peace Prize? So, take your guesses in the comments. And while you're doing that, I want to share with you some resources for further exploration. Yeah, Nico, it is awesome. Good Black News. I love, love, love it. I follow them on Facebook, and I was like scouring through their website, goodblacknews.org today. Great, great stories there. All right, you guys, what year did MLK win the Nobel Peace Prize? While you guys are taking your guesses in the comments, I want to share some resources for further exploration. All right. This week's charity is the King Center in Atlanta. And there are a lot of sites in and around Atlanta connected to Dr. King's life, work, and legacy. And we may not have the opportunity to visit these places in person right now, but so many of these incredible, amazing spaces have opened up their archives and physical spaces for virtual tours. And I want to share 3 of these places specifically that we can visit virtually from the comforts of our own home and learn a little bit more about the life, work, and legacy of Dr. King. The first one is Martin Luther King Jr. National Historic Park in Atlanta. These are all going to be in the resources that I will share in the show notes tomorrow. But if you want to jot anything down now and then go visit it right after the show, you can do that too. But I'm going to share all of these and their links in the show notes that I publish on my website tomorrow. And that's abracurt.com. They'll be up by noon tomorrow. I see some guesses coming up. I see 64, 65, 63. All right, keep them coming. All right, so 3 places that we can visit virtually to learn more about Dr. King. The MLK Jr. National Historic Park in Atlanta. There's the Selma to Montgomery National Historic Trail. All of these places, you guys, have really robust websites and virtual exhibits that we can explore. And the third one is the National Museum of African American History and Culture that is just down the road from us in DC. And DC is totally on lockdown right now for the inauguration this week, but we can visit these places virtually from the comforts of our own home. The National Museum of African American History and Culture, the third place, I highly recommend go to their website and check it out. Even if you live in the area and it's something that you're able to visit, just see what's new on their website and what's going on. Their virtual tours are amazing. All right, I also want to share 3 books with you guys. So I'm sharing 3 places to visit, 3 books that we can read, or 3 reading resources, and 3 watching resources. All right, so let's move on to the 3 reading resources. One I already mentioned, and that is a letter from a Birmingham jail, which gave us this week's quote of the week about the appalling silence of good people, right? And we all aspire to use our voices in moments where it matters, right? Letter from a Birmingham jail. I posted a link to the full letter on my Facebook page. It is public for all to see, so you can go there and grab that link and read the full letter anytime. The second thing I want to share is the book I already mentioned, This April 4th, 1968 by Michael Eric Dyson, because it talks about the aftermath of King's death and the work that was left undone. And it's just this really beautiful, deeply, deeply insightful analysis of the void and the multiple ways that we've, worked to fill that void in the aftermath of April 4th, 1968. And this book was published. It speaks also to the rise of Barack Obama and his campaign and inauguration and his works as a community organizer. So all the way through that era, published in 2008. And the third reading resource I want to share with you guys is the book called Where Do We Go From Here? Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community? And this is King's last book. Okay, King was a prolific writer. Where Do We Go From Here? Chaos or Community was King's last book, his last manuscript that he wrote in 1967, so just a year before his death. That book is available at bookstores. It's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There are places that we can order that book. Where do we go from here? Chaos or Community? It's so prescient and such a look at questions that still plague us today, questions about education and economic inequality and healthcare inequality. So many questions that we are still striving to answer and solve for this country and our world. King had some really wise and insightful thoughts about decades ago in the book, Where Do We Go From Here? Written in 1967. Highly recommend it. 3 resources to watch. 3 resources to watch, you guys. There are 2 great movies about different moments in King's life, in different campaign moments of his life. One is the amazing Academy Award nominated Selma, which also gave us the amazing John Legend and Common song Glory, which I love, love, love. So the movie Selma, and that's available to rent on Prime Video. It's also out on DVD, Blu-ray, all the places. There's also a movie about specifically the Montgomery bus boycott, and that movie is called Boycott. And for those of you who ran out and got your HBO Max subscriptions to watch Wonder Woman 1984, if you still have it, you can watch Boycott, which is available for free with an HBO subscription on HBO Max. And the third watch resource I want to share with you guys, and again, I'm going to put links to all these things in the show notes, but if you want to jot anything down, the third watch resource I want to share with you guys is a documentary called I Am Not Your Negro. I Am Not Your Negro. And it's taken from the James Baldwin book and tells different stories of social change and the civil rights movement leaders. So stories about MLK, Malcolm X, and Medgar Evers in specific. But there's a great, great documentary, especially for people who might not have the same understanding of the work of all of those figures and how it contributed to what we know as the civil rights movement. And it gives, honestly, it gives white people a deeper understanding of those struggles. And it's one that I recommend highly to take a look at. It's really, really well done. I Am Not Your Negro, taken from the James Baldwin book, telling the story of different connections of MLK, Malcolm X, Medgar Evers, and the civil rights movement. All right, so there's 9 resources for further exploration. I want to get back to the trivia question. We are almost done for the evening. What year did MLK win the Nobel Peace Prize? And I see 63, 64, 65. And if you guessed 1964, you are correct. 1964, MLK was the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize for his nonviolent resistance to racial prejudice in America. For nonviolent resistance to racial prejudice in America. 1964, you guys, he was 35 years old and won the Nobel Peace Prize. And at the time, became the youngest person ever to receive that award. Since that time, Malala Yousafzai has since become an even younger recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize MLK in 1964 at the age of 35. Yes, Georgie was correct. Vicky was correct, and Nico was correct with 1964. At the age of 35, y'all, 35, which means that he was taken from us. He was taken from us just 4 years later. Okay. I want us to think about this because this is something that in all the quotes that we share, in all the talk about service and giving back, that really hit me as I was preparing for the show. And I shared a post earlier today in our Facebook group, Sparked Living, that is the companion Facebook group to the series. I shared how this was one of the hardest shows for me that I've ever prepped for, one of the hardest shows that I've ever prepped for because of its emotional intensity. For me, you can't not read about this man's life and work and legacy and the bigotry and brunt of the backlash that he faced and not just shed tears over it, you guys, okay? And I did. And also then there's just the trying to like distill something down into a 60-minute show for y'all, into a 60-minute show that is in my lane of like a lifestyle show and ways that we can, live more meaningful, joyful, fulfilling lives, right? And so I hope I achieved that goal today. But it was challenging for me. And one of the things that hit me hardest that I never really sat down and just really meditated on and thought about was King was taken from us when he was 39. He was assassinated at the age of 39. Okay? Most of, if not every single person in the live audience tonight, myself included, we are all older than 39. So think about what life would look like if our lives had been cut off at the age of 39. Okay? For me, that means I would have never married Scott. Okay? I knew him in my late 30s, but we weren't married yet. I got married at the age of 40. I would have never done this work. Think about all of the incredible life's work that comes from many of us in later years of our lives, okay? My life coaching certification. I was still in corporate America when I was 39. So one thing I want all of us to take from this is to think about all of the work that was left unfinished, all the work that still lies before us that we can all contribute to doing because he was taken from us at the age of 39. So young. That hit me so hard, you guys. Tears were shed over that because it's something that we intellectualize when we think about dates and all of those things, but to sit down and really think about what that means in the trajectory of someone's life and work to be assassinated at the age of 39 before their work was even halfway complete is just staggering. All right. So that was a hard thing for me. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. Okay. That is our show for tonight. Thank you so much for being here to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day with me, to talk about the life, work, and legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., to contribute to this community where we are going to pay 10% forward this week to the King Center to continue to carry on his life's work, right, in our communities through education and training, leadership forums, student forums, in the King Archives and Library. Next week, we will be back here, same time, same place. Next week is the last Monday of the month, you guys. We are almost, next week at this time, we are going to be almost a full month into 2021. 2021, we are going to be in a new presidential administration next week at this time, and it is the last Monday of the month, which means it will be time for our Let's Get Lit book club discussion for the month of January. And we are talking about Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. And yeah, it's already full of Post-its with all the good things that this book is chock full of to share with you all next week. And I know some of you are reading along We are going to be talking about the big takeaways from Daring Greatly by Brene Brown, and how being vulnerable and showing up as our true authentic selves can transform the way we do everything in this life. I can't wait to talk about that with you all and share some big takeaways and get some takeaways from you all who've been reading along. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for celebrating Martin Luther King Jr. Day with me. I hope this episode was inspiring to you. I hope it lit a spark for some further exploration, for discussion, and most importantly, for action. For action, you guys. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. I love y'all. I will see you here next week. Take care and have a great rest of your week, and happy inauguration week, y'all. I will see you next Monday. Bye-bye.